Well, welcome everyone. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Jenny Cavano, and I am the program manager for Central Oregon Disability Support Network. We are the family network for Central Oregon, and we support families with a child that experienced disability. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that we are a part of the Oregon Consortium of Family Networks, and that we have 3 additional networks in Eastern Oregon that we have under us as a program: Family Advocacy and Support Network, Community Force, and Kintsugi. So Family Advocacy and Support Network is in Klamath Falls, Community Force Family Network is in Baker County, and Kintsugi Disability Support Network is in Harney County. So today we are actually sharing this across all of Oregon, so anybody who wanted to join us was welcome to. We encourage you to investigate a little bit more about what each of our family networks do on our websites, and we have a Facebook page which we post information and keep communities connected. We believe that family networks help families become stronger and more grounded in their communities. So it's really important that we reach out to the community partners and other families and encourage them to break that isolation that we oftentimes feel as a parent that experiences raising a child with a disability. I am a wife and mom of 3 children. And as you can see in this picture on the left of your screen, that's my son, Christian. He's my eldest child, and he experiences developmental disability. Christian has challenged many of our boundaries over the years, and we definitely have had to figure out a balance. So I think it's really important, the information that we're going to hear today about how to share that. I'm excited to learn more about that. I have a 15-year-old daughter who is pushing those boundaries all of the time, and I'm oftentimes trying to figure out what are my boundaries and what are hers. So I'm excited to hear about this today. A few housekeeping things that I wanted to go over. As I said before, everyone is muted. Please use the chat box for questions or if you have a comment. We're asking that you turn off your cameras. That's more for security. We don't always know what's going on in the background, and this is being recorded today. We would like to put this up on our website so that families and community partners have access to this training ongoing. We will be asking questions at the end. Answering questions at the end. So if you could hold them till then, it's just a faster way of us being able to present the amount of material that we have in a short amount of time. I wanted to take a quick poll right now so that our speakers have an idea of who has joined us today. I'm going to launch that poll right now. We have 3 questions, as you can see on the screen. I'm launching that poll. If you could just answer those questions in the poll, that would be awesome. I'm wondering if the poll isn't working. We're not having. Oh, here we go. Now it's starting. It just takes a little bit of time to figure it out. Thank you for doing this. About half of our participants that have finished voting. So I'm going 3 questions is quite a bit of information. So we'll give them a few more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now, and we'll move on. So today's guest speakers, Allie and Stephanie, are going to share their information about drawing those lines and what boundaries and communication looks like. And this is the second part of our behavior series, and so if you missed our first training, it was coping with anxiety, and we have a copy of that on our website for you to view. So I'm going to hand it over to Allie and Stephanie.
All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm really excited to share on this topic today. I'm a mental health therapist, and I work for Deschutes County, and I'm a board member at CODSN. And Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself more?
Hello, I'm Stephanie Hunter. I'm a behavior professional in the Central Oregon area. Also a parent of a child that experiences disability, and a foster parent as well of a young adult, and also a CODSN board member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me think of sharing. I'm also a sibling of an older, my older sister has Down syndrome. And so I have a passion for working with families, providers, to provide mental health support for families. And one of the biggest topics we talk about is having healthy boundaries in a family system. So I think it's a really important thing to talk about. And to begin, we're just going to talk about relationships and what boundaries are, and then we'll get into talking about how to set boundaries and communicate them. Maybe discovering what kind of style of boundaries you've already been setting in your life, so that you can kind of see what possible positive changes you can make. And so from the poll, it looks like we have professionals and then parents or providers of people that are older than 13. So maybe the stories that we have today will hopefully be very applicable to both of you. So, all right, you should have received an email, a couple handouts, and one of them looks like this, with me in the middle. And so this is an opportunity for you to participate in this exercise by following along and kind of examining your own relationship. So this is a visual for creating or putting people that are in your life in circles, a visual for seeing how close are my relationships to me. So if you didn't receive this handout and get a chance to print it out, to fill it out, maybe grab a piece of scratch paper and do your own little diagram with a bunch of circles. So you are at the middle of all of your relationships, obviously. When you look at kind of laying people out in circles of how close are people to me, I want you to think about the first circle first. Who is most closest to you in physical proximity? I'm just going to use myself as an example. The people that I live with are the closest to me, my kid and my husband. They are a part of my inner circle. I share daily life with them. I talk to them every day. I care for them every day. They're in my own home. So as you're filling out your own, I want you to think, okay, who lives in my house? Or who do I share my day-to-day activities with? Who knows where I am at what time? These are the people that are in your inner circle of relationships. So these are the people that are closest to you. Then as you start to expand out, I want you to think of, okay, well then who is next? Who kind of expands from there? For me, it would be my parents, my in-laws, my sisters, and my best friends. They're kind of at the next level of close relationships to me. These people I talk to almost daily, but definitely weekly. I know what's going on in their lives, how they're doing. They help me with caregiving. I know that I can lean on them for help. These are people that I really share personal emotional stories with. They know a lot about me. So the people that are next closest to you also probably know a lot about you and share with you. You share with them, but they're not as close as living in your same home and maybe knowing exactly what you're doing all the time. So hopefully you're starting to see maybe a distinction as you're creating your own web of relationships. All right, and then as you expand a little bit more, other people that are close to me are my coworkers. I see them, if it's not during COVID time, I see them every Monday through Friday, or now I see them over video. But people that I go to church with, you know, I know who they are, they know me, I see them weekly. I may not know like all the personal details of my coworkers or people that I go to church with, but I know a lot about them, or we share similar values. We maybe speak the same kind of language, same topics. We have similar interests, things like that. And then other friends would be in this circle. And then expanding out. This one you might even want to think about who in your life do you pay or for services or paid providers. You know, I don't really have a close relationship with my dentist, but my dentist is in my life. So they're going to be a part of my relationship circles. So is my doctor, maybe neighbors. Maybe some of you neighbors are a little bit closer in. For me, I don't really talk to my neighbors much, but you know, I see them, I know what they're up to. They're in my life. And then my own therapist, that one actually I have the most difficulty placing. Where do I put my counselor? Because it's not a two-way street. It's not a mutual relationship, but she definitely knows a lot about me. So I placed her in that circle because she's a paid provider for me, and I really don't know much about her own personal life. So she's a little distanced from me, but she's definitely in my life. So then when you think about the outside of your circle, these are people that are in your life, but maybe you don't know them personally, or they don't interact with you much, if at all, but they make an impact on your life. So government officials like the mayor, the governor, these people are a part of your circle of relationships, but they're kind of exterior. Mail person, cooks at a restaurant, I don't really see them, but they're serving my food. They're a part of my chain of relationships. So hopefully this exercise, you've been following along and drawing out your own relationships, because this helps you get into the mindset of, okay, what kind of boundaries do I have with which people in my life? With each of these circles, I have different kinds of boundaries with all of them. So let's talk about types of boundaries. This is not a comprehensive list, but there are many different ways that you can set a boundary with someone. So I'm going to go kind of quickly through these because it's like I said, it's not a comprehensive list, but these are examples of ways that we set boundaries in life. So we set boundaries through what we think about, what we choose to read or watch on TV, what we choose to think about intellectually. We have intellectual boundaries. We have boundaries around time. So how much time we have to talk on the phone, how much time we have to be in person doing an activity with someone, or how much time we set for work or for play. Or, you know, I think a lot of us, including myself, are struggling with boundaries around work and home life right now. If we're working from home, where's the boundary between I'm doing work or I'm helping my kid, or I'm doing something that's related to home or work? So we're all trying to create these boundaries all the time, every day. And another one that comes to mind for time is sometimes we'll tell people like, oh, I don't have time for that, or I'm really busy. Well, it's kind of all in the way, it's relative. It's all in the way that we make space or have time of what's important to us. So time is another really big way that all of us set boundaries. We set boundaries emotionally. As I was going through that example of circles of relationships, I don't share the same amount of personal emotion and stories as I do with my husband than I do my dentist. If I do, that might be a little bit of an unhealthy boundary. There are people that in our circles that it's appropriate to share certain things with, and it's not appropriate to share other things with. So the closer they are in my circle, the more I'm going to have a more open emotional boundary with them. And then we have physical boundaries. So how much we allow personal space for others, personal space for ourselves, who we hug, who we kiss, or handshake, high five, fist bump. Like, gosh, we do that all the time with different people. Like, you may not hug your counselor, but you might shake their hand. Or I don't know, Stephanie, for you as a behavior specialist, do you usually give fist bumps or high fives. If it's not COVID season, you know, there's a certain
right now.
yeah. There are certain physical
handshake, right?
Yeah. With professionals, we do more handshakes. With people that are closer to us, we might embrace them with a hug, and so we deal with that all the time. And then lastly, I'll give an example of moral boundaries and what we have as our own belief system, what we see as right and wrong. That dictates our decision making, and we can set boundaries around, you know, some of these other things, like what we choose to watch on TV or read, or who we hang out with and what activities we do, based on what is morally valuable to us. Okay, so I'm talking fast because we have a lot to get through. The last thing, well, not the last thing, moving on. Let's talk about healthy versus unhealthy boundaries. And I'm going to show you some extremes first. On one extreme, I want you to imagine that you've got a field. And I talk about this kind of boundary with my clients so that you can really start to think about, well, what kind of boundaries do I set with relationships? If you think about an open field, one way to have a boundary is to have a stone wall. And this is to illustrate a very closed boundary. If you are on one side of that stone wall, it's really hard to get to the other side. That means that you're pretty closed off to, in other words, you're closed off to relationships, not sharing a lot with other people, not being vulnerable, not letting anyone in or out of your stuff. Then on the opposite end, we have on the field, no wall, no gate or fence whatsoever. It's just an open field. What's mine is theirs, what's theirs is mine. I share everything with everyone. It's the oversharing, too open extreme. So you've got these two extremes of too closed, not sharing anything with anyone, not being very closed, to the other extreme of being too open. So what our goal for our boundaries are is someplace in the middle, which I like to call a fence or a gate on your field. Because if you have a fence with a gate, you get to choose judiciously, with wisdom, who do I let in and who do I not? Or what do I let in and what do I not? Thinking about those types of boundaries. Who do I hug? Who do I not? What do I watch on TV and what do I not? Who do I share this personal story with that is very meaningful and vulnerable, and who do I not? These are choices. And so it's not that we do or don't, it's that you're making really conscious, healthy decisions that are in line with your values so that you can have healthy relationships. So our goal in thinking about healthy boundaries and communication is, for you in your field, you want to have a fence where you are intentionally opening and closing it, choosing to share or have a relationship with someone or not. So be thinking about that visual. Stephanie is going to share an example of kind of maybe moving from one extreme to a healthy middle of a boundary.
This is an example of one of those time boundaries, and this is related to being a foster parent. And when the young man in our home first came to us, he had lived in a group home, and he was used to people being up at the crack of dawn ready to make a hearty breakfast for him. And I am not and never have been a morning person. But you know, for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to have these open boundaries. You know, I'm going to get up. He's up at 6 in the morning. He's ready to go. I'm up. I'm making, you know, waffles and eggs and all this stuff. And I'm absolutely miserable. And so, you know, what we kind of like, he could eat breakfast burritos every morning. And I'm just like, I can freeze these. So I was like, hey, you know, I feel really tired when I get up early, and I would like to, you know, help you make breakfast ahead of time so you don't have to wait for me to get up all sleepy. So I'm nocturnal, so I'm up late at night when I'm at my best, making a week's worth of breakfast burritos to put in the freezer. And, you know, he was getting up at 6 in the morning and popping those in the microwave. And so, you know, what started as, you know, a very open boundary of, you know, I'm up, here I am, you know, making this breakfast. We kind of eased into, you know, me being able to say, hey, this isn't working for me, but I want, you know, but I know that these breakfasts are important to you. So we can both get a little bit of what we need here. And, you know, and then there's some breakfast that you gotta make fresh, right? So, so we kind of have an agreement, as, you know, like he loves biscuits and gravy. You can't make that the night before. You gotta make that fresh. So I was like, so on biscuit and gravy mornings, like, start texting me about 7:15 and I'll get up about 7:30 and I'll make those biscuits and gravy. So he's still getting, it's not like breakfast burritos every day or cereal every day. Like we still have those special breakfasts, but it's like a compromise. And it's still like not 6 in the morning, which it just can't do. And then what started happening is he's, you know, but he's like, I'm still waiting for you to do stuff. How about you teach me how to make breakfast? And so he's showing like my boundary has kindled his interest and motivation and doing more for himself. And so where we are at now is, you know, he's, you know, getting up, or he's rather the night before, you know, making his own breakfast burritos now with us just kind of on the periphery, because he still needs, you know, reminders around kitchen safety. And you know, I'll talk a little bit later about sharing the load with a partner. But now my husband is the one getting up at 7 in the morning, doing some breakfast supervision and teaching him how to make omelets. And so I was able to set a boundary with him, being like, these breakfasts are killing me, man. Like, can you please help me out? So just an example of those time boundaries and how a positive is that is you're modeling boundaries and you're kindling motivation to set healthy boundaries, but also, hey, you know what, maybe I can take a little bit of this work on here too.
Yeah, I thought that was a perfect example because I think I hear a lot in my office of foster providers, particularly, or parents of people over 18, that it's really hard to, like, well, what do you mean? I don't know how to set a boundary, or am I allowed to set a boundary? I'm supposed to be caring for them. Boundaries are a part of caring for them. The boundary that Stephanie set around breakfast, that enabled then him to learn some new skills. And that was a very reasonable, appropriate boundary to set. So anyways, I think let's continue on, and I want you guys to all be thinking about having that healthy medium of a fence. So thinking about communication and how we communicate our boundaries, there is a spectrum. On one extreme, kind of like the extreme of closed boundaries, we have aggressive communication. On the other side, the other extreme, open boundaries, we might have passive communication. And the goal is for us to be assertive in the middle. Some people have a negative connotation of assertive, but it's a really positive thing. We want to strive for assertive communication. And I'm going to give you later a formula, actually, that you can make sure that you're being assertive when you talk to someone. Because sometimes people think they're being assertive and really they're being, you know, aggressive or passive. So going through each one, aggressive is more a communication of closed boundaries. Usually avoiding close relationships by getting angry and yelling or shutting the other person down. Aggressive can be not asking for help, being really closed to receive help, and not sharing anything personal with anyone. So not being open. Passive, need to move this so I can see. The other side, the other extreme would be passive communication. So open boundaries, hard time saying no. That's very common that I see in foster providers or caregivers, because we all became caregivers and helpers for a reason. And we can at heart be people pleasers, and it is hard for people pleasers to say no. And so boundaries can be really hard. And then we end up being on the passive end, where we let people walk over us or take advantage of us, and that's no good either. Either oversharing personal information, not knowing like kind of how to filter or who to share what with, and being overly concerned about what other people think. So that's more on that open, too passive. So our goal is for healthy boundaries, assertive communication. Assertive communication shows that we're taking care of ourselves. We are willing to share appropriately with other people, and we're able to communicate what our feelings are and what our needs are, and be able to set boundaries. So, Stephanie, can you give us that other example that you had with your daughter for this?
Yeah, this is my daughter is in, like, she's gonna be a senior. Oh my goodness. But this is a middle school story. And so she had a friend who was a boy, and she was showing me some text messages from him, and she did not understand the sexual context of the text messages and I did. And I went straight to the aggressive side of the spectrum. Like, I'm going to call the school. I'm going to like, mama bear, full protective mode. And then what I noticed was her response was to freeze and shut down in response. And so I had basically taken up all of her feeling space with my emotions about protecting her, and wasn't even really checking in with her about how she felt. We couldn't even finish that conversation because she was so shut down. And I had to be okay with not having immediate closure, and leaving, her room and not being able to resolve that right away, because I had put her in that place with my response. So when we were able to, talk about it, and I was able to kind of open with, hey, I feel worried about this, but I want to hear how you're feeling about this. She felt betrayed by her friend. She was embarrassed because she didn't know that it was sexual, and also just completely like freaked out by my first response. That was just too much for her. So once we were able to get all that stuff on the table, we came up with something that we still use today. It's the I won't freak out rule. And so I said, hey, because this is like was one of my biggest concerns about having a teenager, was that she's going to hide things from me, that she's going to find herself in, trouble and not seek me out for help. So I was like, hey, like, I promise that if you come to me with information about yourself, your friends, anything you're struggling with, I won't freak out. I told her what I learned from my response in this situation. And so that we've my daughter, I feel, at this point will come to me with things now because we had that experience of me having too aggressive of a boundary, that I kind of stepped back and realized, that, and there's been things she's told me where I'm like, this is something I can't keep a secret, but let's come up with a solution together, on how we're gonna, resolve this, or let that parent of your friend know what's going on, etc. The interesting thing, twist in the story is my daughter experiences autism. And one characteristic for some people with autism are very rigid, rule-based boundaries. So what ended up happening is she just decided she was never going to speak to this boy again, look at him, or interact with him. He basically disappeared from the universe. Like, it was so extreme that a teacher called me to say, hey, I've noticed that. And so I was able to talk to this teacher and say, hey, he was sending these text messages, but I also don't want, the law to come down on him for that, because he's a kid and I don't want him to get in a whole lot of trouble for this, but this is why. And so the teacher with that information was able to work on a little mediation between them, because she, understood the situation. And so they were able to, I don't think they ever became friends again, but she started, noticing that he was in the room when they had to do group projects or something. So it was interesting, so her boundary in that was interesting too. So
and I think what Stephanie was sharing is not bullet pointed in my slide, but like her example of like coming in hot, like lots of overreaction, like Stephanie's emotions filled up the room instead of letting her daughter have the space to share her emotions. And when we look at assertive in the middle, it's both people being able to share their emotions with each other in like a calm way where both people can be heard. And I think that's the aggressive part of what Stephanie was explaining in her first in the first part of your story. I just want to highlight that that's not what I listed there, but that's certainly more of that like aggressive form of communication when you're overreacting or taking up the space.
Yeah, and I had to honor her boundaries that she set with this, at school, even though it was impacting the school environment. That was, we definitely talked about it afterwards. And I was glad that there was a helpful teacher that wanted to help maybe bring that more to the center.
Yeah. All right. So that let's move on to how do we actually communicate our boundaries assertively. Funnily enough, we have a formula to help us. So I'm going to walk through the formula of how we know that we're being assertive, and then we'll go through lots of examples. So if you're having difficulty setting a boundary or knowing how to articulate yourself so that you can have a healthy relationship with someone, I encourage you to think about using this formula. The first part of it is really understanding what are my own core emotions that are coming up about this situation. And one of the handouts that we sent ahead of time is a feeling wheel. And I'll show it on the next slide in a second in case you didn't get that handout. But if you have that handout with you, take a look at it. It's a feeling wheel, and it starts with certain emotions, core emotions in the middle, and then it expands out into other kinds of emotions. And this wheel is actually, research has shown that it is really effective for people with autism in particular, and the way that their brain works and understanding emotion, that the colors and the way that it's shaped and the way that it is laid out makes a lot of sense. So you know that for future reference. So starting with I feel of what the core emotion is. And then the second part of the formula is when blank, when something happens, an objective situation. So what we're describing is the situation. We are not describing what the other person did to you and how you can blame them. That's why I put the word you and crossed it out. Because when we set boundaries with other people, it is really tempting and really natural, myself included, to blame the other person. Like, I am angry when you don't unload the dishwasher correctly, is something that might come out of my mouth pretty frequently. And so we want to make sure that we're not blaming the other person, because really a boundary is about you. It's not about the other person. And then when we do say you, the other person gets really defensive. And when we get defensive, we're not listening to the other person anymore. We're just ramping up and getting ready to defend ourselves. So we want the other person to be able to be in the spot of listening. So that's why we're not going to use the word you. We're going to use the I statement of I feel, and then when, state the situation. And then you get a chance to say what you need or what your request is in order to solve the conflict, set the boundary, whatever it is. So I would like blank to happen. Whether that's a request of yourself, I would like space, I would like time, or that's a request of the other person. I would like you and I to have a chance to sit and talk about this. We're going to come up with the examples, but that's you really understanding what are my needs and how can I make a request of them. So maybe you have examples of needs might be I need time, I need space, I need patience, I need food. That's another big one for me when I get hangry. I need sleep. They might be basic functioning things, and they might be like these abstract concepts of stuff that we need. So let's go through a few examples. In fact, I want to highlight one that Stephanie already said. In her story with as a foster provider with the breakfast example, she had said, I feel tired, which is a valid emotion.
And cranky.
And cranky.
And cranky.
Okay. So frustrated, yeah. When I wake up early. So she made the situation about herself. It wasn't when you a demand for me to make a gourmet breakfast for you, or when you want me to wake up early. No, it was about her. When I wake up early, I feel tired. And I would like, I think you said, I would like to, make you breakfast at night so that you can heat it up in the morning. And that worked, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to respond well to this. In fact, a lot of people come back to me and are like, Allie, that didn't work. They were so angry, or they stormed off, or they yelled at me. Yeah, that might happen, because if they're used to you being aggressive, or they're used to you being passive and being taken advantage of, or they're going to see this as very abnormal behavior, and they're not going to react probably in the way you want them to. But that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So really keep that in mind, that just because someone else's behavior after you set a boundary with them is not dependent on whether your boundary was healthy or not. So.
And I have a very fresh example of this with my foster son wanting TikTok, an app on his phone. And there's, a lot of really, questionable content on TikTok. And it's also very, very public. So that assertive dialogue sounded like, I feel worried when strangers can see you because these videos are not private. I would like to help you be safe by seeing what you want to post and giving you feedback if it's safe for others to see. And kind of set the stage for, I will be backing myself out of this at some point, but like right now, I want to help you be safe on these apps. And then also letting him know that he would see things on those apps that, he's gonna, I'm not trying to keep him from the world because that would be silly. But I was like, heads up, people are going to be doing things on there that you shouldn't copy because it's not safe. But I'd be happy to talk to you about anything you see on there, and any questions that you have. And so we're in the early stages right now. Well, and then it turned out, I was like, what do you want to do on TikTok? And what he wanted to do on TikTok was something that he could just do in a video app. That was not TikTok. So the conversation actually moved us to what he really wanted. But I'm
so
sure
Stephanie,
that TikTok will come back around.
When you had kind of articulated this boundary in your own request, was he receptive to that, or did he push up against it?
He wanted to know how long I would be supervising him. Mm-hmm. He wanted to know when it would end. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't refusing, but he certainly wasn't happy that I was setting that boundary. Mm-hmm. And then so he wanted to know, and for how, so for a week, right? For a week.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love this example too, because this is a great opportunity for you as a provider to help them with assertive communication. And you already did the last part of understanding what his needs are. So, you could even show him this feeling wheel and be like, all right, so you shared your piece around you feeling worried when strangers can see his content. You would like to be a part of it. Now, asking him, what do you feel? What do you feel about TikTok? What you're wanting to accomplish, or how are you even feeling about my boundary? He might say, I feel, I feel frustrated, or I feel excited about using it, or I feel frustrated with your boundary, right? So allowing them to recognize their own feelings around it. And you've already talked about what the situation is. then helping them recognize, well, what is the need? What is the thing that you need to get out of this, or what do you want to get out of this? You learned from talking to him that he wanted a place where he could edit videos, or like
yes, he wanted to make videos of his stuffed animal breathing fire.
Yeah. Cool.
That's like, TikTok doesn't do that, but
right. So now we can talk about how, yeah, TikTok may not be the place for that. And so rather than having this back and forth of you're not allowed to be on TikTok and you're mean, and how this, we can all see how this could have escalated into this giant argument with lots of shutting down, potential yelling. I mean, or it could have been really passive aggressive. But instead, you're both able to share emotions, not blame each other, compromise, express what your needs are, make requests of each other. And you are still the provider. You are still able to set the healthy boundaries and help guide him so that he has healthy boundaries in his life. Right?
And he's been, texting me like, I saw a video of, this, and this. And I was like, how did that make you feel? That's not okay. I'll never do that. So he's already, like, I was like, why don't you watch TikToks for a little bit before we post?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, beautiful way of, being a provider and helping assertively, and really respecting him and respecting yourself, taking care of you as a provider and taking care of him. So the last thing we want to talk about before we open it up to maybe some other examples or questions and answers is talking about how important it is when you think about the family system to be united as parents and caregivers when you're setting boundaries. It is so common how many times do you hear kids think, well, if I ask mom, she'll let me have the candy bar, but if I ask dad, he'll say no, just as a silly example. But we want to be on the same page as parents and caregivers, because then we're sending consistent messages. And then the person that you're providing care for is better supported, and they have, we all know that consistency and routine really helps with strong development, healthy relationships, all that good stuff. So Stephanie wanted to share some more ideas on being on the same page, and some ideas on maybe how to communicate that between partners.
And this is something, I'll start with how I learned it, which was as a parent. And this was hard learning for me, because after my daughter was diagnosed, I already worked in the field, so I of course now knew everything about how her life should be run. I went into post-diagnosis parent stage, and so my husband, who isn't in this field and hasn't had really disability touch his life very much, I kind of started pushing him out of the way, and just let me do that. You're doing it wrong. And thankfully that got kind of reflected back to me through a lot of struggle, that I was not allowing him to struggle with her, so they could learn together. And I remember one night so well, they were power struggling. And this was after I had, kind of realized I was walking all over him as a parent, and it wasn't nice and it wasn't fair. I sat in my car and screamed my head off. It's just like, you're doing it wrong. I pounded on the steering wheel. But I took, I was like, and you know what? When I came back to that house, they were smiling, they were having a good time, they had gotten through whatever it was, and they didn't need me there. So, and he just looks at me, he goes, thank you. And I was like, whoo, man, that was hard. So that was a lot of really hard learning on my part, to watch them struggle and not intervene, because that's how he was going to learn. Mm-hmm. There was one time when, he said, you can't go to the sleepover this weekend. And I felt that was too harsh of a boundary because she needs friends. She needs social opportunities. So I was like, hey, could you help me with this in the other room? Because I didn't want to walk all over his parenting in front of him. So I was like, hey, could I implore you to walk that boundary back? Because she needs friends. She needs social interaction. Could you think of another way to set that boundary? And he walked out and he's like, all right, you can still go, but I can't remember what boundary he set. I wasn't walking on his parenting, but I was questioning his boundary in a assertive, I'd like to
as a
say,
team,
way.
like consulting together as a team.
Exactly. And so this is something that I have brought into my career as a behavior professional. And, I'll be sitting in, living rooms, pre-mask days. I think it's the parent who gets rescued a lot feels very validated when someone else is coming in being like, hey, whichever parent it is or whichever caregiver it is, like, I've noticed that, you're taking away their struggle. Like you got to let them have, you need to not walk all over that. And I shared that story that I just told about my own learning. And you see this relief just wash over the parent that is in that rescued position because somebody noticed it and helped them feel validated in that moment. And we laugh and we joke and, I try to make it really light. But my favorite intervention is, I think you left your lights on. So those times when, the rescuer parent is doing they're taking their step back and they're not intervening, even though it's really hard for them not to, but they see that the other parent or caregiver really needs a break. I teach staff this in group homes as well. So just say, hey, I think you left your lights on. And that is a way to give that, it's an agreed upon code word ahead of time. So no surprises for that person to leave the room. So you're not walking over their boundary, but you are recognizing they probably need a break. And I coach folks. I'm just like, when someone comes in and says, I think you left your lights on, you're not gonna you're gonna say, oh, thank you. and you can be angry with them. You can feel like they stepped in too soon. All of those are completely valid, but that conversation is going to happen somewhere else. Because that united front is really, really important in teaching, skills and boundaries for the folks that we support and our kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you could be coming up with your own code word, whatever that means for you as a partner with your team member, your co-caregiver, and so that you guys can have a rhythm of how do you set boundaries together, or when the other person doesn't agree with that boundary, then what can be the system that you guys set up to revisit that boundary and talk about it together, rather than holding resentment or bitterness, or somehow align with one of the kids or the persons that you don't want the family system to have this triangle effect. You want yourselves as caregivers, providers, and parents to be united. That's really important. Yeah.
And not easy.
No.
If you could see the Zoom emotion of me telling that story, but just reliving that experience of like screaming in my car, that was some hard learning for me because I thought I knew everything. Mm-hmm. And then to realize that I was sabotaging his parenting was really like, oh my goodness.
Well, coming back to Stephanie, you bring us back to this, the image of having a field, and rather than being a stone wall and being like closed to having a partnership and being like, I'm the parent that has all the rules and all the tools and all the things, you became more of a fence where you're like, you know what? No, my partner gets to be a part of setting boundaries and communicating, and we can be united on this. So yeah, it's a much healthier relationship then.
And he had better ideas than I did. Like when I actually listened to him, like he would be like, why are you freaking out? Like, quick story, like with books, she would, when you start a book, you have to finish a book. And she was getting in trouble at school because the teacher would say, it's time to put your books or your coloring away. And she would just look at him and keep doing what she was doing because she needed to finish. And I'm like thinking of like all these like behavioral strategies. And my husband's like, oh, I just gave her a bookmark. And I'm like, genius.
It's a literal boundary of where you are in the book, what comes before and after.
Totally.
Yeah. No, that's great. All right, cool. So that brings us to the end of our material, and we want to open it up to any examples, questions we can help through, or if we went through fast through any particular slide, we can go back and revisit it. So maybe Jenny can help us navigate some of the comments or questions if there are any.
Yep, so let's open it up and see if anyone has any questions.
What do you do when your person is playing one person off of the other, like husband-wife thing? The person is playing them. You mentioned it earlier, Allie. I will, you know, oh, sorry, I got a headache here. Mom won't let me do this, so I'll go ask Dad, or
Triangulation.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
because it happens frequently. So how do you set a boundary on that?
Well, I think that comes back to Stephanie's example. And Stephanie, I mean, chime in if you have a different thought, but I'm just thinking of noticing it and calling it out, and being able to step aside with your partner and privately and talk about what you've noticed, and using the tools of assertive communication, sharing your feelings, sharing your needs as a caregiver, and allowing your partner to do the same, and coming up with a system of how can we stop the triangulating? This has been happening. How can we stop it?
Well, we've sat down and we've discussed it, the three of us, many times. But it's the 2 hours after it happens, and we come as a united front, you know, and my husband's like super patient. And so we come as a united front, and then we've got a little bit of attitude for a couple of hours, more than just a little attitude. So I think that's where the question, I guess I'm not making very much sense. I'm sorry, guys.
You totally are. It's sometimes that process of like, that can be frustrating. Hey, I used to be able to get a no here and get a yes here.
Yeah.
That system's not working anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with that. Of course, they're gonna push against that.
Mm-hmm.
So that pushback that you're, you know, I mean, and something that with my daughter, you know, is like when she would, you know, I would say, you know, well, let me talk to your dad about that. Like, so, or what did your dad say? Like, I would make sure that, you know, she was hearing that we had to have communication about it.
Yeah.
But then, interesting with my foster son, it's a little bit different because he'll be seeking the rules from me. He'll be like, you know, Brian said I could do, oh, I shouldn't say name. My husband, you know, he said I could do this. And I'll be like, you know what? When you're with him, you guys set the rules. It doesn't matter if I like them or not.
Okay.
So I, you know, I've kind of been like, you know, whoever you're with is the person, is your point person, is it, so it's a little different with him. So he's not always seeking me for that as the decision maker. I want him to respect my husband as a decision maker.
Right. Right.
I think the other big thing is to learn as a caregiver and parent how to tolerate the pushback from boundaries, and just knowing that that's going to happen, and knowing that that's a part of the process, the attitude and the pushback. And as long as you are setting the healthy boundary consistently, that pushback will decline over time. But like anticipating it and knowing that it'll be there is a part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
We have another question. Do you have any recommendations for what to do with a child who is passive aggressive? This is a younger sibling of a child who is on the spectrum and whom we've worked a lot with to address extremely aggressive behavior. So she seems to have you gone to the other extreme in the opposite direction in her responses or reactions. Withdrawal is her weapon, and she will refuse to communicate or engage when we try. This has created a lot of problems in the household, interpersonally.
Totally. I wish I knew how old that sibling was. Does it say?
Vanessa, can you share with us how old?
No problem. She's 9.
Okay. Yeah, that's really hard. So a sibling is reacting passive aggressively to boundaries of the family.
Yeah, or any expectations or situations she's uncomfortable with, her immediate reaction is to shut down and refuse to communicate or interact. It can sometimes make her brother flare up, who, is just trying to get her attention. It can cause problems when we need to go somewhere and she's just not following directions. She pretty much passive aggressively breaks everyone else's boundaries and expectations for how she interacts as a part of the family. It's very weird.
I'm curious because I noticed that you have gone from extremely aggressive behavior to withdrawal?
No, I
Replaced
apologize.
it? What's that?
I apologize. It was hard to see what I was writing. I couldn't see anything in the past.
Oh.
It's my son who has had extremely aggressive communication. So her response to that has been extreme withdrawal. And so now that's how she communicates with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually handle blow-ups and aggressive communication really, really well.
Yeah.
After working with him for a long time, and her, I have no idea what to do.
Well, I have two ideas. One idea is to really praise when she is sharing a feeling or she is participating in a family event you want her to. Like, wow, I love how you cleaned up the dishes, or I love how you ate with us for dinner, or I love that you wanted to go get ice cream with us, and really praising when she is being assertive or being involved and not shutting down.
Okay.
And then using this formula with her. I'm going to create an example, but obviously you can take the time to come up with your own. But I feel sad when we don't get to do things together as a family, or when we're all in separate rooms. So you're not blaming her or calling out her behavior specifically, but you're talking about the situation where, she's withdrawing, she's isolating, she's shutting down, she's not sharing. I feel sad when, as a family, we're not talking about our feelings or we're not sharing about our day. And I would like for you to share with me today one feeling that you've had and give her a visual of different feelings. You can say any feeling that you felt. I would like for you to and invite her then.
Okay.
Yeah, carving out that one-on-one time to have a safe space to communicate those feelings where she doesn't have to worry about that extreme response.
For the most part, we've managed to get her brother's episodes down to, we're in a pretty good rhythm with him. And so that's not usually a main point of contention for her anymore. I feel like she's just internalized the opposite, and so that's now her go-to. She also gets away with a lot when he's freaking out and she's just not doing what I asked her to do, or she's just not being responsible or participating. She doesn't get in trouble for that. She's just in the background, not making a fuss, but she's also not doing anything she needs to be doing. It's really weird.
Mm-hmm. One other thing I have, I think that for her, it's her coping strategy for handling her own emotional reaction to her brother. And so looking at it as a coping strategy may also help you kind of come at it with compassion and help her understand, this is the way you're coping with it. And maybe she doesn't, that word is not the appropriate word to use with her. But there are other ways, helping her learn other coping strategies to deal with the stress or the negative reaction of her brother's behaviors.
And Vanessa, has anybody introduced you to the book, The Explosive Child?
Yes, I have it on my shelf.
Okay, yeah, because that, I recommend, explosion and implosion. Okay. The strategies are still, I've noticed that, when this is happening, so kind of like what Ali was saying, to have those, treat it as a coping skill and have those dialogues around honoring the fact that it's a tool that she's using that might not be necessary anymore if the work has been done with her brother, but she might be holding on to it because she's afraid it will come back.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, guys.
Well, we're all out of time. I want to honor everyone's time, so we're at a little after 1. So I'm going to ask that if you have further questions, please reach out to us, because we can send them on to Allie and to Stephanie, and maybe even just connecting with another parent. Vanessa, I really resonate with you. I have a 15-year-old at home, and I would love to connect with you, because my oldest son had the same type of behavior that you're describing with your child that has the disability. So let's connect. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be emailing you out with a link to the recording once I get it up on the website. In that email, there'll be an activity survey. We ask that you fill that out. Our funding oftentimes comes from grants that we have to write for, and we get to show how we're using the money that we already have. And this just shows that we have high quality trainings. It's really important. Please fill out that activity survey, and we appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us, and we hope we get to see you again. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.